All right, so are you ready to dive into some Spanish grammar with me today?
Always ready for a good grammar deep dive.
We're going to be looking at forming plurals in Spanish based on this video I saw.
Okay, awesome. I'm excited.
The video was super fun and engaging,
Great.
so I'm hoping we can make our deep dive just as interesting.
Sounds good.
So right off the bat, the video starts with the simplest rule.
Right.
It says if a noun ends in an A, an E, or an O, you just add an S to make it plural.
Okay, just like English.
Yeah, exactly.
That's easy.
Super simple.
Love it.
So like if you have coach for car, add an S, and you've got coaches meaning cars.
Yeah, nice and easy to remember.
Right.
Perfect.
But then, of course, it can't be that easy the whole time.
Right.
So what happens when a noun ends in a consonant or like an I or a U?
Then you add S.
Ah!
Yeah, so instead of just S, you add S.
So like camion for truck.
It becomes camion.
Okay, I see. I
yeah,
see.
Yeah,
So consonants, but also I and U endings get the S.
you got it.
Well,
You're a natural.
I'm starting to get this, but you know, one thing that always trips me up is words that already end in raise.
Oh, yeah, those tricky ones.
Like, how do you even make those plural?
Well, you have to think about the context
Okay,
and the articles.
right.
Because a word like llueves for Thursday or paraguas for umbrella,
Yeah.
they actually stay the same in the plural form.
Oh, they do?
But to know if you're talking about one Thursday or multiple Thursdays,
Okay.
you look at the article.
Ah.
So it's el for singular and los for plural.
So the word itself doesn't change.
Nope.
You just change the article.
Exactly.
Oh, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So el jueves would be this Thursday,
Right.
and then los jueves would be every Thursday.
You got it.
Okay.
So subtle, but important.
That's a good way to put it. Subtle but important.
Right.
So then, okay, we were just talking about ow and u endings,
Uh-huh.
and I feel like there's got to be exceptions here,
Of course.
right?
There are always exceptions.
Spanish loves to keep us on our toes.
Absolutely. It wouldn't be fun without them.
So what are the exceptions here?
Okay, so words like shampoo, esky, and menu, they actually don't follow that S's rule.
Oh, they don't.
No, they just take an S.
Really?
So shampoos, eskis, and menus.
Oh, okay, so it seems kind of random then.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's language for you, right?
I guess so.
Always keeping us on our toes.
All right, so what about the letter Y?
Ah, yes, yeah.
So the video mentioned that it can act like a consonant sometimes.
That's right.
So does that affect how we make plurals?
It can't. So, for example, words like ray for king,
Okay,
lay for law, and buoy for ox
okay,
all follow that is rule.
they do.
Yeah, so you get rays, lies, and boo.
Okay, so you just add S,
Yeah, in those cases.
but I bet there's an exception.
Always.
Yeah.
The word jersey.
Okay.
Instead of just adding the S, the ya
Yeah.
actually transforms into an I before the S.
What?
So we get jerseys just like in English.
Oh, wow, so it changes.
It
It's
does.
a little strange.
Well, it's a loan word from English.
Oh, that makes sense.
So it keeps that English pluralization.
Fascinating how these little details can change everything.
Exactly. You have to pay attention to those subtle differences.
All right, so we need to talk about tildes,
Ah, yes, the tilde.
the little accent mark above the vowels.
Right.
So how does the tilde affect pluralization?
Well, some words that have a tilde in their singular form actually lose it when they become plural.
They do.
Yeah.
So, like, what are some examples?
Okay, so ballon becomes ballons.
Okay.
Carton becomes cartons. And anglais becomes inglés.
So the tilde just completely disappears.
Exactly.
Interesting. Why does that happen?
It all comes down to shifts in syllable emphasis.
Okay.
When these words become plural, the stress moves, and as a result, the tilde disappears.
Oh, that's interesting. So the pronunciation changes.
It does.
And so the tilde disappears because of the pronunciation change.
Precisely. It's like a little linguistic dance.
I like the linguistic dance. Okay, so now I'm thinking about what happens when you encounter nouns that are already inherently plural.
Ah, yes. Those are fun.
Even in the singular form, like
Yeah.
tijeras for scissors or gafas for glasses.
Exactly.
So are you telling me that there's no singular form of these words?
Nope. They're always plural, even when you're referring to a single pair.
So like you can't say one pant.
You can't, it has to be pantalones.
That's so interesting.
It is, isn't it? It's one of the quirks of Spanish.
Yeah, very interesting. And this leads us to another important concept,
Okay, what's that?
grammatical agreement.
Ah, yes, very important.
So tell me about that.
So when you're using an inherently plural noun, every other element in the sentence needs to agree with it in number.
So like an adjective or a verb would have to be plural too.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, for example, if you're talking about your new binoculars, you would say, mis prismáticos son nuevos.
Okay.
And notice how everything is plural there.
Yeah, you have mis van,
Right.
right? Then san from the verb ser, and
Uh-huh.
then nuevos for new.
Exactly. Everything has to match that plural noun.
Wow, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's all about creating harmony within the sentence.
So what happens if you want to refer to like a single pair of something,
Ah, good question.
like shoes?
Yeah,
Because zapatos is inherently plural.
it is.
So what do you do then?
Well, you can use the phrase un par de.
Okay.
So, for example, if you want to say one pair of shoes, you would say un par de zapatos.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah,
So even though a pair technically contains two items,
right.
using that phrase un par de makes it a singular concept grammatically.
Exactly. It overrides that inherent plurality of the noun.
Wow, this is so fascinating. I'm really starting to see Spanish in a whole new light here.
It's amazing what you can learn from focusing on just one aspect of grammar.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've only just scratched the surface.
There's so much more to explore.
But before we dive into even more plural adventures, I want to pause here for a moment and let you, our listeners, absorb all this amazing information.
Take a deep breath
Try and think about how these rules work. Maybe even come up with your own examples,
and get ready for part 2.
where we'll unpack even more fascinating nuances of Spanish plurals.
It's going to be a wild ride. So stay tuned. So much to learn about plurals, right?
It's really amazing. And, before we move on completely, are there any other, tricky situations with Spanish plurals you think our listeners should be aware of?
Well, you might come across words that end in a's, is os, or us,
Okay,
and think they need some kind of plural magic.
I could see that.
But actually, words like virus is martes for Tuesday
Uh-huh.
and parachoke's for bumper
Okay.
stay exactly the same in their plural form.
So even though they already have an es,
Yeah.
they don't get any, additional a's or anything?
So, not at all.
That seems counterintuitive.
It does. But remember what we learned about juevs.
Yeah,
The key is to look at the articles.
right.
You change the article from el to los to indicate plurality.
Ah, so context is everything.
It really is.
I remember that example from the video.
Oh, yeah.
El martes me vi de viaje.
Which means,
This Tuesday I'm going on a trip.
right.
But then if you say, los martes viajo a mi pueblo, every Tuesday I travel to my town.
Exactly.
Oh, so it's all about those little shifts in meaning.
So subtle changes.
So have you ever thought about this?
What's that?
Even the names of letters themselves have plural forms in Spanish.
It's true.
That's so interesting.
Right.
I never really thought about that before.
Yeah, it's one of those things you don't really think about until someone points it out.
So how would you say the plural of A, E, A, O, O?
For the vowels, you just add e's.
Oh,
So it's 8 e's, e's, o's, and u's.
Okay, so pretty straightforward.
Yeah, follows the pattern we've seen.
What about consonants?
Most of them do too.
So they just add A's.
Yep, like B becomes bez, Q becomes Q's, G becomes G's, and so on.
Okay, so pretty consistent.
Mostly.
Is there an exception?
There's always an exception.
Of course there is.
The letter yoy.
Okay, what about ya?
Its plural form is igrigas.
Egregious. What?
Yep. It's a strange
It
one.
really is like every rule has its own little exception.
Exactly.
Hidden in the shadows.
And that's what keeps things interesting.
That's true. I was thinking about those inherently plural nouns we discussed, like tijeras and gafas.
Mhm.
Do you think there's a connection between the types of objects
No.
that are inherently plural across different languages?
That's a great question.
Like, is there some universal logic at play, or is it just cultural?
It would be fascinating to research that,
It would.
to see if certain categories of objects tend to be inherently plural across multiple languages.
Yeah.
Like tools or body parts.
Yeah,
That
exactly.
would be a really interesting study.
I'm already imagining a giant chart comparing these things.
Oh, that would be amazing.
We could do a whole deep dive just on that.
Maybe we should.
But for now, let's bring it back to Spanish.
Okay.
As we wrap up this part, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
I'm listening.
So we've explored how plural forms vary based on the ending of a noun, the tilde, even if a noun is inherently plural.
Right.
But I'm thinking, what does the concept of plurality tell us about how we as humans understand quantity and categories,
Ooh, interesting.
and the world around us?
That's a big question.
It is.
It makes you think about how even the most basic grammar concepts have deeper meanings
Exactly.
and philosophical implications.
Right, because just the act of distinguishing between singular and plural
Yeah.
suggests we have this need to categorize and quantify our experience.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
fundamental to how we understand the world.
And so by learning about how other languages do this,
Right.
we get a better understanding not only of grammar,
Uh-huh.
but also about how other people think.
It broadens our perspective
It does.
and helps us appreciate the diversity of human thought.
Absolutely. This deep dive has been amazing. We've explored so much about Spanish plurals.
And language in general.
Yeah, it's been a real journey of discovery.
So much more to learn, though.
There is, but for now,
Yeah.
let's take a break and let everyone process everything.
Get those brains working.
And we'll be back soon for the final part of this episode.
Can't wait.
All right, so we're back for the final part of our Spanish plural deep dive.
Ready to wrap things up.
You know, I've been thinking more about those inherently plural nouns.
Like tijeras and gafas.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think there's any connection between the types of objects that are inherently plural across different languages?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Like, is there some kind of universal logic?
I see what you mean.
Or is it purely cultural?
It would be really cool to see
Right.
if, like, certain categories of objects tend to be inherently plural in a bunch of languages.
Yeah.
For example,
Right.
do tools.
Or body parts.
Exactly. Are those more likely to be inherently plural?
It's a fascinating thought.
It really is. It would require some serious research,
I know a whole cross-linguistic study.
but the findings could be super insightful,
I'm already picturing this massive chart.
comparing plural forms across languages.
Yeah, it would be incredible.
Talk about a deep dive.
Right, but for now, let's bring it back to Spanish.
Okay, back to Spanish plurals.
So as we wrap up this episode,
Yeah.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought to chew on.
Okay, hit me with it.
We've seen how plural forms can be different
Mm-hmm.
based on the ending of a noun, the tilde, whether the noun's inherently plural.
Right.
But what about the bigger picture?
Okay.
What does this whole idea of plurality even tell us
Hmm.
about how we understand things like quantity and categories?
Yeah, like the world around us.
Yeah, exactly.
Like-
I know, right? It
Right.
makes you realize
Uh-huh.
that even basic grammar stuff can have these layers of meaning
Absolutely.
and even like philosophical implications.
It's true. We take it for granted.
But just the fact that we distinguish between singular and plural shows that we have this need to categorize and quantify our experiences.
It's fundamental to how our brains work.
And by looking at how different languages handle plurality,
Right.
you can learn so much about different ways of thinking
We get a glimpse into other cultures.
and their worldview.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It really is. Well, this has been an incredible journey,
I've loved exploring all this with you.
and we hope you've enjoyed it too.
Absolutely.
We encourage you to keep learning about language.
And stay curious.
Keep those minds sharp and those ears open.
And keep diving deep into the world of language.
Hasta pronto, everyone!